Okay, well, I guess we can begin.
I respect what she does.
This is not what we normally do. This is what we usually do. We're part of the American Civil War Shooting Association. We have marksmanship competitions with Civil War weapons. But this is what we do in the office. What we're doing here today is recreating the Old Soldier Fiddlers. The Old Soldier Fiddlers was a real group, and it was led by a Union veteran by the name of John Fatigue. John was born in Huron, Michigan in 1844, and sometime before the Civil War, his mother bought him his first fiddle. Now, you'll see on the video slide coming past, it shows a picture of him as a young man, probably about 15 or 16, with his fiddle. Well, he just turned 18 when he enlisted in the 24th Michigan Infantry Regiment. That unit would later become part of the Iron Brigade. He was one of those guys that volunteered to help with Battery B, 4th U.S. Artillery. And he went from his infantry unit to the artillery unit until about the Battle of Antietam. Then he returned back to his infantry unit and rode and served throughout the rest of the war. He actually finished his enlistment as part of the funeral procession for Abe Lincoln. He was at Camp Butler outside of Springfield, Illinois. And if you look at the picture that scrolls past, there's a group of them sitting there at Camp Butler. And that's him and his 2-3 kids. This is in the 1900s. But, here's him at 15 years old. Okay, that's him sitting all the way down on the left. He's sitting on the floor. He's got an X underneath him, and it's marked Dad. It's one of the family photos. Anyway, he finishes out at Camp Butler, and he goes home, becomes a civilian again. He gets married, he has 2 sons and a daughter, and he joins the GAR. Well, he's in his mid-50s when he goes to Michigan Day at Gettysburg, and something there inspires him. He comes home and he puts together this group called the Old Soldier Fiddlers. And the makeup of the group is both Union and Confederate veterans. And they're all fiddle players. And he's got a bit of a P.T. Barnum in him. So he comes home and he finishes out the war the same way he went in, as a private. But when he starts this group, he promotes himself up to a colonel. And he starts billing them. They start billing themselves as the greatest vaudeville novelty act ever created. Like I said, they're both Union and Confederate violin players, but they always insisted on being called fiddlers, never violinists. They bragged that none of them could read music. They performed from coast to coast, and even in Canada, in any venue that would hire them. They performed in GAR halls, veterans homes, hospitals. If you look at the picture that flashes back, them standing on the big stage with the flag behind them, that's at the 50th reunion of Gettysburg, and they are playing in the Iron Brigade headquarters tent. So, this group played after 1900. When the group finally disbanded, and I don't know exactly where that is, and he kept playing right up to his death in 1924 at the age of 80. He even played barn dances on the radio at WEAF radio in New York. And there's actually recordings of him that still survive. Now this is a sing-along. And none of us here are professional musicians, but we're all Civil War enthusiasts, so we don't worry about reading music or anything like that. We worry about having a good time. So we're going to start off with an old favorite called the Battle Cry of Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, in this corner, wearing blue trunks and hailing from this great state of Wisconsin, on guitar, playing the role of Colonel John Petit himself, my son, Jack Van Callenberg. On vocals, representing Yankee Girls Everywhere, my daughter, Miss Amy Van Callenberg. Now, one of our veterans couldn't make it this year, so I drafted a new guy. Our newest veteran, my favorite grandson, Private Ben Van Callenberg. Now, once Ben got sucked in, his cousin, my other favorite grandson, he volunteered. So, playing the ukulele is Private Max Van Callenberg. Okay, and in this corner, wearing the gray trunks, hailing from somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line, on fiddle, representing Southern Bills everywhere, my wife, Darlene Van Callenberg. And proudly representing the entire Confederate Army for this performance only, and playing the role of Solomon, Devil Saul Carpenter, I'm Gary Van Callenberg. Okay, this next song. The Iron Brigade is one of the most storied groups of soldiers in Wisconsin Civil War heritage. The 2nd, 6th, and 7th Wisconsin regiments combined with the 19th Indiana and the 24th Michigan to become one of the most fightingest brigades in the Union Army. Now, I usually like to say something about the songs that we do, but I really don't know much about this one. All I know is it's a perky song about a unit that I love, and I found it on the internet, so we're going to sing it today. It's called the Iron Brigade. 1861, I remember it well. Ellis Randall rang out beyond his bell. Now boys and just assemble and answer the call, or if not, we're surely bound for hell. From Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana too, they came from the factories and the fields to band all together as the Iron Brigade to fight hard and never to yield. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade that will fight for the red, white, and blue. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade will fight hard till the battle is through. John Gibbons said, those four chants won't do, those black Barbie hats will get us seen. He taught us how, with courage and pluck, to be the best team there's ever been. And after Honor's Farm and Old Manassas too, we showed Johnny Raptors what we knew. We stood like fire and South Mountain too, and showed Georgia boys what we could do. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, and we'll fight for the red, white, and blue. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, we'll fight hard till the battle is through. Gettysburg Ground one day in July, John Reynolds led us in the fray. Lord Hart led all those boys to Tennessee, them rebs had to turn tail and flee. There's few of us now, this war is done. Too many mothers mourn for their sons. But our Iron Brigade will soon heed the call, if there's ever a battle to be won. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, and we'll fight for the red, white, and blue. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, we'll fight hard till the battle is through. You know it by now. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, and we'll fight for the red, white, and blue. We are the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, we'll fight hard till the battle is through. Yes. Okay. Very good. Concord Banner, Father Abram Joseph Ryan. Give me a show of hands. Who's ever heard of this guy? Believe it or not, this guy is famous. He became known as the poet priest of the South. Not so he's famous. Not so much here and not so much anymore, but he became known as the poet priest of the South. And what's interesting is that a lot of his story happens not far from where we are right now, sitting here. So how famous can somebody be that you've never heard of? Well, let me tell you. In chapter 41 of Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell mentions both him and this poem specifically. Apparently both he and P.T. Beauregard are frequent visitors to Aunt Pitty Pat, and it doesn't take him much encouragement at all for him to start reciting this poem. In Southern schools, his poetry was required reading, and a lot of kids had to memorize it. Books of his poetry are still in print today. There's one of them. Let's see. In Nashville, there's a high school named after him. In Knoxville, he has multiple historical markers alongside the road. In New Orleans, at the Museum of the Confederacy there, it's right down the same street as the World War II Museum. This guy has a stained glass window devoted just to him. And in Mobile, Alabama, there's a large bronze statue of him downtown in a public park and a grotto out at his gravesite. Well, let me give you the short version of his story. Abram Joseph Ryan was born in Maryland to Irish immigrants' parents, where his father was working as an overseer at a plantation. When he's 2, they moved to St. Louis, just a little bit south of St. Louis, just right across the border from Illinois, across the Mississippi, and he's raised there, and he gets his education all through the Catholic school system. At age 17, he enters into a seminary just north of St. Louis, again, just right along the river. He enters into the seminary there, and at 19, he's ordained a Catholic priest in the Vincentian order of the Catholic Church. He stays there a couple of years, but then his order, the Vincentian order, sends him to one of their seminaries in New York, where he works with students and discipline and some other stuff. Anyway, during that time period in New York, the abolitionists are just taking the Catholic Church to task. They feel that they're especially complacent about slavery, and they're especially taking the Irish Catholics to task because they think they're especially lax on the issue. Well, Ryan doesn't feel comfortable there at all. He starts asking, can you bring me back to Missouri? I don't like it here, people aren't. Anyway, eventually the Vincentians let him come back home, and they station him down in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. That's where he is when the war begins. But there's still a problem. The Vincentians have decided that they need to stay neutral on the politics of the day. And Father Ryan, he doesn't want to. He starts taking multiple leave of absences where he's roaming around the South, and he's talking politics. Anyway, there's one case where he and General P.T. Beauregard share a podium at a Masonic temple in Nashville, and they're talking about politics. So anyway, after that, the Vincentians reassign him to a parish in LaSalle, Illinois, which is about a 2.5-hour drive from here. He served there over a year, but he just cannot cope with staying quiet on the issues. So he decides to leave this order of Vincentians. He leaves the order. He's still a Catholic priest, but he leaves the order and he goes to a parish in Peoria, which is about 3 hours a drive from here. It's there. He's there probably over a year. But in 1863, he gets labeled as a copperhead. And while he's away in Chicago on a business trip, the pro-Lincoln newspaper there publishes a story about him being arrested with an underage girl in a brothel. Well, he never even bothers coming home. He just heads straight south, and that's pretty much where he stays the rest of his life. Now, undoubtedly, while he's down south, he ministers to Confederate soldiers, but there's no official record of him ever enlisting or being recognized as a chaplain. When Lee surrenders, he's at a parish in Knoxville, and within hours of him hearing the news of Lee's surrender, Amy's about to put the music for you. At age 44, he passes away in a monastery in Louisville, and his body is eventually sent to Mobile, Alabama for burial in a Catholic cemetery, which ironically today is located right along Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. Now, if anybody ever invents a time machine, the first thing I want to see is the Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali fight. The thing I want to see right after that is that debate between Martin Luther King and Father Hebrew Joseph Bryant. So, after that long-winded story, we're going to have Amy sing a little bit. This is the Concord Banner. Thank you.
How popular that flag is today in the South.
Yeah.
Didn't know what was coming.
Well, I hope everybody has had a good rest now, because we're about to do 5 in a row in a little thing we call the Battle of the Bands at Petersburg. And what we're going to do here is recreate something that really happened. Now, the Richmond-Petersburg campaign was at the end of the war. It began in early June of 1864, and it lasted about 10 months. It started with a series of battles that ended with a 9-month-long siege in Petersburg. Now, during that campaign, soldiers on both sides dug over 30 miles worth of trenches, mostly around the eastern and southern outskirts of Petersburg. If you look at the pictures around Petersburg, it looks more like a World War I set of trenches than it does a Civil War battlefield. Anyway, one of the most notable attempts to breach those defenses around Petersburg was the crater. And this is where miners from Pennsylvania dug a 500-foot shaft underneath the Confederate trenches, and they packed the end of it with 8,000 pounds of gunpowder. And on the morning of Saturday, July 30th, they detonated that charge and blew a hole in the Confederate line. Now, the Union attack and tried to make it through that breach, that failed. But what we're going to create here is an event that happened on the evening of the very next day following that blast. The Iron Brigade was assigned to the 5th Corps at the time, which, if you look at the words crater, July 30th, 1854, it's around in there somewhere. That's where the Iron Brigade was located. And this tale comes to us through Jerome Watrous of the 6th Wisconsin Regiment. And Lance Hurtigan recounts Watrous' tale of in his latest book.
It was an event that Sunday following the explosion, however, that touched on the strange war between people who shared so many things, language, history, culture, but were so far apart on others. With enemies still across from each other in their earthworks, a truce was called from noon until dark, so parties from both sides could bury the dead. About 6 p.m., the watching Federal soldiers were surprised by a remarkable sight. For more than a mile along the Confederate front stood men, women, and children on the enemy's breastworks. Not soldiers, but men in citizens' clothes, their wives, their children. The two sides stood quietly, looking across the field over the heads of the burial parties working on the field. Somewhere in the enemy lines, a Confederate band began to play Dixie, and the bright blast of music caused the enemy soldiers and civilians to raise a cheer and wave handkerchiefs. As the last notes died, Union bands responded with the Star-Spangled Banner, and so it went for many minutes, with the Confederates coming back with Bonnie Blue Flag, and the Federals answering with Yankee Doodle. Just as the shades of night were appearing, the witness said, the Federal bands, as many as 24, began to play Home Sweet Home. No cheer followed. Within a few minutes from the time our bands ceased to play, the watcher said, the Confederate bands, a great number of them, took up the same beautiful, impressive strains, played Home Sweet Home as our folks had played it, and then there was a mighty cheer along both lines of the battle. After a time, the citizens went back to Petersburg, and our forces settled down to their old modes of living. The next day, the cannons began to roar, the mortars to heave their shells and shot back and forth, and the sharpshooters to pick off the unwary.
Okay, that's the story. We're going to recreate that today. We're going to sing 5 in a row, starting with Dixie's Land. I'll start it off.
Thank you.
the road with us. Okay, just a couple notes about the songs we've been singing. Dan Emmett composed Dixie's Land in 1859 in New York City.
New York City?
That's right, New York City. When he heard the Confederates were using it as their rallying song, he said, if I had known to what use they were going to put my song, I will be damned if I would have written it.
Oh, you quarterback.
Yeah, I'm quarterback. Okay. The Star Spangled Banner was not the official anthem in the United States during the Civil War. It wasn't become the official anthem until 1931. The words were written by Francis Scott Key in 1812 as he watched the British bombard Fort McHenry, but the tune was much older. It's from a British song from the 1700s. Yankee Doodle was also a British song from the French and Indian War. British military officers sang it to mock the colonial Yankees, which they led. The tune actually comes from a nursery rhyme by the name of Lucy Lockett. The Bonnie Blue Flag was the only song that Lucia sang that was written during the Civil War. It was written by a guy named Harry McCarthy, premiered it in the spring of 1861 during a concert in Jackson, Mississippi. It's actually a new song words written to an old Irish tune by the name of the Irish John Carr. Now, Harry billed himself as the Arkansas comedian, and he performed widely throughout the South during the war with his wife and a cockatoo that was trained to squawk, "Be careful for Jeff Davis." I guess it was quite an act. Now, Home Sweet Home was written in 1823 by John Howard Payne and Sir Henry Raleigh Bishop for an opera by the name of Clary. Ironically, one of these guys was homeless and the other one had a reputation as a home wrecker. Payne, who wrote the lyrics, later spent time in a debtor's prison, and he always lamented that he never really had a real home. Bishop, he was a well-known English conductor who's, quote, a noted reprobate, homewrecker, and spendthrift. He died in poverty. So, that's what we just been saying. Okay, on to the next one. We're going to give your voices a rest here. Okay, Camp Chase. Camp Chase is both the name of a place and the name of a fiddle tune. Camp Chase, the place, is a lot like our Camp Randall in Madison, Wisconsin. It was a state-run camp on the west side of Columbus, Ohio, that was used to muster and train state militia. Like Camp Randall, a part of it was used to confine prisoners of war during the Civil War. Camp Chase maintained separate prisons for officers, enlisted men, and even civilians on its ground. And if you look at the map of it there, it's just the stuff in the top left corner of the camp. Yeah, that's the prison camp. The rest of it is the training ground. Now, initially, the treatment of the prisoners was very lenient. In the beginning of the Civil War, things were pretty darn loosey-goosey. Sutlers were allowed in, and officers who took an oath of honor could actually leave the camp and roam the city. They were allowed to keep their servants, slaves, and the camp it became a tourist attraction. They even charged admission and had guided tours of this place. After some complaints, an investigation was held and stricter discipline was imposed. Up to the end of paroling, the camp was just a transient facility. But when the war went on and paroling ended, the number of the prisoners increased and the conditions grew harsh. There was crowding, drainage problems, sewage problems. The quality and the quantity of the food was lacking. The barracks were leaking, poor ventilations, heating problems, all kinds of complaints. When the original facility that was built to hold 4,000 people was jammed with 7,000, they expanded it to hold 7,000, but then the prison population swelled up at the end of the war to 10,000. There's not much less at the Camp Chase today. You're seeing about all of it right there. We visited there and went through on a trip. There's not much left. Okay, so that's Camp Chase the place. Now Camp Chase the Fiddle Tune is named after Camp Chase the place. And yeah, it's named from the prison camp. And the story goes, the commandant of the camp at the beginning of the war was a big music buff. And I think, not sure, but I think that's this Buckwood. You see him on the horse there? I think he's the guy that did this. He was a big fiddle aficionado. So he decides to hold a fiddle contest amongst all the prisoners. And for the first prize, he's giving out a pardon. Away with this. Now there are a lot of rebel fiddlers confined there. There's one guy named Bowie and another guy named Solomon Carpenter, Devil Saul, who I'm playing today. All the contestants played the same fiddle tune. And while fiddle tunes change over time, and they often go by more than one name. When they played this tune for that contest, it was probably an old-time breakdown known by the name of George Booker, which is awful similar to the Marquis of Huntley's Farewell and a couple other ones. But whatever it was known by up till then, ever since it's been known as the Camp Chase. Well, Devil Saul won that fiddle contest. And he won his freedom by adding some unusual new notes to the tune. Now, the parole that Devil Saul would have signed included a pledge not to take up arms against the Union. But the rest of the story goes that he just ignored that part of it. He went home, he joined up with another Confederate unit and fought out the rest of the war. So, up there, with that out of the way, here we go. Camp Chase. Now you know the story of Camp Chase. Well, no one was more, I hope you guys had a rest, but you can sing again. No one was more hated or heavily relied upon than the regiment's bugler. The troops hated him because he woke them up so early in the morning.
Sorry.
Signaled them what to do all day, and then told them when they had to go to bed at night. But the commanding staff relied heavily upon them to get their troops going and going in the right direction. On a cold winter's night, it was an old trick for some prankster to pour water into an unguarded bugle. Overnight the water would freeze and the bugler would have to wait for it to thaw out before he could roll reveille in the morning. So, okay, here we go.
What's the difference between an onion and a fiddle?
Well, nobody cries when you chop up a fiddle.
Hey, Brad, what's the difference between a fiddle and a trampoline?
People usually take off their boots before they jump on a trampoline.
Hey, Johnny?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a viola and a violin?
Viola burns a little bit longer.
Hey, Brad, how's a fiddle like a cannon round?
Oh, by the time you hear it, it's too late.
Hey, Johnny, how can you tell that a violin is out of tune?
You can tell by the bow moving.
Man, you know all of these.
How do you know the fiddler is in jail?
Oh, he's behind a few bars and he can't find the key.
So, why are a fiddler player's hands like lightning?
They never hit the same note twice.
How do you know if the stage you're playing on is level?
Because the Confederate is drooling out of both sides of his mouth.
Both sides. Both sides. That was smooth. That was smooth.
Okay. A guide is giving a tour of a famous Civil War battle site. Here he points out one spot where Southern troops routed out a whole regiment of Yankees. And over there, the rebels wiped out another platoon of Yankees. Down the road a mile, there's another valley where we captured 1,000 Union soldiers. And a tourist pipes up. Well, did the North ever win a battle? Tour guide says, yes ma'am, yes we did. But not while I'm giving the tour.
Hey, Brad,
Ah.
If a Southerner divorces his wife, is she still his cousin? Gotcha. So what's the difference between a Yankee girl and a Southern belle?
A Yankee girl says, yes, I'll kiss you, but a Southern belle says, yes, I'll kiss you
Oh,
all.
now cut that out. Okay, next slide.
Nope, that's mine. I got this one.
Okay. Well, it's a well-known fact that one rebel whipped 10 Yankees with a cornstalk.
Oh yeah, if that's true, why did the South lose the war?
Oh, he just couldn't get you damn Yankees to fight with cornstalks.
Oh yeah, well, did you hear the one about the Confederate who died drinking milk?
No, how'd that happen?
Cow fell on him.
Oh, what the heck is the use killing you damn Yankees? You kill one and 10 more pop up.
Gentlemen, enough! All of you fought in that war for what you believed in, and we all paid a terrible price. But now it's over, and once again, we're all Americans, just as our founding fathers meant us to be. One nation, under God, and now with liberty and justice for all of us. Let's all rise together and play a song both sides used to sing. Goober Peas.
Dad, I got this one.
Good job. Favorite on both sides.
That's the first time we've ever had a standing ovation. Thanks, guys.
We like to finish
You're the
our
best
performances.
Sorry.
That's okay. We like to finish our performances with the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And this year we're throwing in a trivia question about the song. Does anybody here know what the Iron Brigade had to do with the song The Battle Hymn of the Republic? Okay, I'll give you a hint.
I read the whole book.
What?
I read the whole biography of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and we had a discussion on it.
Okay.
I wrote the page number down, and I can't remember the answer.
For the rest of you, here's a hint. Julie Ward House, she won the center there. she wrote the thing. Her husband is lower left, Samuel Gridley Howell. The reverend she was with during this story is Reverend James Friedman. He's in the upper left. And Rufus Dawes was then a captain in the upper right. And Sergeant John Tickner is a member of the 6th Wisconsin we're going to be talking about. And no known pictures exist of Sergeant John Tickner.
So did she have a dream? Is that the answer to the trivia? Or
What?
did she have a dream like of it? Is that the answer to the trivia?
No. Kind of. Well, yeah, there's a dream involved. Let me tell you the story. On November of 1861, Julia Ward Howe, the poet, abolitionist, and social activist, is watching a Union troop review along with her husband and her minister. In the distance, there's a rebel movement, and some of the troops in that review get sent to repel the rebels, and the rest of them get sent back to camp. On the road back, there's a traffic jam. Rufus Dawes there would later become the Iron Brigade commander, but when this story happens, he's a captain in the 6th Wisconsin Company K that was raised from around the area of Boston. Here's an excerpt from his memoirs. With our columns wrote a lady visitor, and our leading singer, Sergeant John Tickner, as he is wont to do on such occasions, led out with his strong, clear, and beautiful tenor voice, hang Jeff Davis on a sour apple tree. Which that song was much more popular during the Civil War than this one. But the whole regiment joined in the grand chorus, especially on the Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. Now at this point in the story, Reverend Clark turns to Julia Ward Howe and says to her, Mrs. Howe, why do you not write some good words for that stern tune? And Mrs. Howe replies, that she would like to, but the right words had not come to her yet. Well, after I went from Dawes' book, I went to Julia Ward Howe's memoirs, and here's what she said. I went to bed that night as usual and slept quite soundly. I awoke in the gray of the morning twilight, and the long lines of the desired poem began to twine themselves in my mind. Having thought out all the stanzas, I sprang from my bed and scrawled down the verses without looking at the paper. Now, 3 months later, the Battle Hymn of the Republic is published as a poem in the Atlantic Monthly. So the answer to the trivia quiz is Sergeant John Tickner, the 6th Wisconsin singing of John Brown's Body helped inspire Julia Ward Howe to write the Battle Hymn of the Republic. John Tickner was actually born in Illinois, but when he was 3 years old, he was a sawmill worker up near New Lisbon in Wisconsin, and that's where he enlisted from. He was promoted to the first sergeant of the company the same month that this story occurs, and he eventually rose to the rank of captain before being killed on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Like I said, there's no known pictures of Tickner, but you can see his gravesite. It is less than 3/4 of a mile off of the Lisbon exit from the interstate. If you ever get up there, it's waiting for you to see. So, with that,
You've won double jeopardy, is basically what that is.
yeah.
Well done.
Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Thank you.
long-winded too. Well, we usually end with that one, but
Encore.
we actually got asked to do encores twice last year. Both times, this is the one they asked. We normally don't do it. It's not a Civil War song. But I figured if you listen to me tell you about it, we play it for you. Okay, Ashokan Farewell. Ashokan is both the name of a town and a reservoir in the Catskill Mountains near Woodstock, New York. Ken Burns popularized this tune in his 1990 PBS miniseries, The Civil War. Now, that series goes 11 hours. And for 59 minutes and 33 seconds of it, you're listening to this tune playing in the background. And that's over 9% of the time. So he really established this tune. Now, it's written by a guy named Jay Unger. Since 1980, Jay Unger and his wife Molly have been running a music and dance camp at the Ashokan Center for Nature, History, Music, and Art. And in 1982, after all the music camps were over, Jay had the blues, and he sat down and he composed this song. He says, by the time the tune had took form, I was in tears. I kept it to myself for months, unable to fully understand the emotions that welled up whenever I played it. I had no idea that this simple tune could affect others the same way. But the following year, Jay's band, which is known as Fiddle Fever, they needed another slow tune for their upcoming album, Waltz the Wind, and Jay offered this one up. Ken Burns heard that album in 1984 and asked to use it. Jay Unger, when he introduces this song, he sometimes describes it as a Scottish lament written by a Jewish guy from the Bronx. Jay Unger plays a lot of Civil War music, but Ashokan Farewell is a contemporary tune. So, this is Ashokan Farewell, written by Jay Unger. Special guest stars, Ben and Max Van Cowenford. Take them out, Max. On the ukulele.
Thank you.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
being here.